Colonel Mrozinski.
JD, excellent question. Ladies and gentlemen, the fair tax, it's a package. It includes the dissolving of the 16th Amendment. That's the fair way to attack this, not to go after and hope that we can do it. Ladies and gentlemen, in the House and in the Senate, the fair tax has 73 supporters currently and 8 in the Senate. The flat tax only has 10 in the House. And the flat tax only taxes consumption, but what it also does, it taxes everything along the assembly line. Fair tax does not tax used items. Ladies and gentlemen, until something better comes along, Congressman Mrozinski supports the fair tax, and my colleagues that I will meet in Congress.
Tricia Pridemore.
Thank you, JD. Our current tax code is 74,000 pages long, and it's 185 times bigger than it was when the 16th Amendment was adopted back in 1913. When you consider the amount of work that goes into a family just to prepare their family's taxes every year, it's just a system that we simply cannot continue. Of the 3 major proposals that are out, the fair tax, the flat tax, and the simple tax, any of them would be better than what we have today. But I tend to lean towards a simple tax. It doesn't include a prebate, and I believe that fundamentally we can roll back our tax code.
Congressman Bob Barr.
We made a very small but important start toward a fairer tax system when we passed the Balanced Budget and Tax Reduction Act of 1997. Unfortunately, even though that brought us to a balanced budget for about 3 or 3.5 years, the cost of government and government spending shot through the roof again. The only way to ensure that we have a fair tax system, a better tax system, one that keeps government spending in check, is to do away with the 16th Amendment, do away with corporate taxes, and institute what has become known as a simple tax, which is a consumption tax at a much lower rate than the fair tax proposals, because it is much simpler. It separates out FICA, so you have a much more direct way through a consumption tax, and you have a timeline that moves us rationally in that direction.
And the second question will be from Roseanne Hall, past president of CCRWC.
What do you believe is the most important issue that affects the voters in District 11, and how do you propose to address it?
I'm sorry, Representative Ed Lindsay.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. The number one issue I believe that exists on the federal level is the size of our debt. At the present moment, it's approaching $18 trillion. And we don't seem to have a Congress willing to take on those tough jobs of bringing it into line, balancing the budget. That's why I strongly believe that we need to move toward a balanced budget amendment. And I've already started that this year in the Georgia House. I was a co-sponsor of a bill that calls for a convention of the states to have the states themselves move forward with a proposed federal constitutional amendment. We've waited on Congress long enough. In 1982 was the first time Congress even voted on a proposed balanced budget amendment. At that time, it was only $1 trillion, the size of the debt. Today, it's over almost $18 trillion. So I believe that we need to be focused on trying to balance the budget. We need to fight for a balanced budget amendment. That way, we can start bringing the federal government under control and keeping it out of our lives.
Senator Loudermilk.
The national debt is by far the most dangerous thing that this nation is facing nationwide. By the end of this fiscal year, it's going to be $18 trillion. To give you an idea of how big $18 trillion is, if you go back to the beginning of our current calendar, which will be the birth of Christ, and you put away $16,000 every 60 seconds, you still wouldn't have enough money to pay off the debt today. Just the interest payment that we made on the debt alone last year would have bought 2,700 F-35 fighter planes, which cost $151 million apiece. We have to reduce the debt. The only way to do that is to force Congress to do it. Congress is not going to balance a budget. They've proven over the years of all the constitutional amendments they've ever passed, all of them have restricted state powers, not their own. Congress must introduce a balanced budget amendment, which will be the first act that I work on to force Congress to live within its means.
Colonel Mrozinski.
Ladies and gentlemen, the first thing that affects us is our energy. As a congressman, you go to Washington to affect policy implementation or changes or get the burden off the backs of the people. We haven't discussed an energy plan since 2008. I say we have an energy plan. I'll be one of my first acts to Congress is just call for an energy policy in this nation. Balancing the budget? Absolutely. I called for that on my inaugural address, as it were, in August 17th. And I said that this has to take place first. And also, ladies and gentlemen, the Affordable Care Act, less regulation also equals less and more jobs. Less jobs if we keep it, more jobs if we get rid of it.
Tricia Pridemore.
Thank you for the question, Roseanne. As I've been campaigning for nearly the last year, the number one thing that people want to talk to me about is job creation. People want to work, and job creators want to be able to create more jobs, especially those that own small businesses. Job creation is debt reduction. When you look at the $17 trillion debt that our nation faces, what better way to reduce that besides cutting some spending programs, but fundamentally putting people back to work? I also strongly believe that when you consider that the benefits to the individual of job creation, what people want more than anything else is to be able to have a paycheck, to be able to bring home for their family and produce for them. It's the fundamental basis of our American dream.
Congressman Barr.
The most important issue as I travel across the 11th District is to reduce the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government. People in the 11th District want their lives, their businesses, their local government back in charge of their lives. They want to get the federal government out of their pocketbook. They want to get the federal government out of their businesses. They want to be able to build roads where the citizens of that district wish those roads to go. They want to be able to hire people that they need to run their businesses and not have the federal government tell them what to do. They want to be able to keep more of their money so they can spend it on their families and those things that are important to them. They want reduced taxes in all of its manifestations. What a U.S. congressman from the 11th District needs to do today and every year until we get this monstrosity back under control is to reduce the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government.
Mr. Levine.
We have two problems. First is the short-term problem we have to deal with is jobs. Long-term, it's the national debt and growing the economy. Just last week on NBC News, Brian Williams said that 1 in 9 American workers will get a full-time job. 8 of 9 unemployed American workers will never have a full-time job again. He said that 36% of working American families have less than $1,000 in savings. This is terrible. So what we have to do is grow the economy. We have to grow it through, as I said earlier, eliminating corporate taxes. We can work on reducing the national debt, but the federal government doesn't want to do that. It wants to keep spending, spending, spending to buy votes. We have to grow the economy, and we can do that very quickly by eliminating corporate debt, by corporate taxes.
Thank you. And the third question is from Chip Lake.
Thank you. This race is a Republican primary in one of the most predominantly Republican performing districts in the country. There are very few differences between you all on major policy issues. All of you are pro-life. All of you oppose Obamacare. All of you advocate for tax reform and for smaller government. What single item in your background or in your resume do you think best separates you from the others on stage?
Barry Loudermilk.
What separates me from the other folks that are up here on stage, in fact, they're all very good people, and I've got relationships with all of them. Mr. Barr and I go back 10, 15 years. Representative Lindsay and I served together in the State House, and Ms. Pridemore, when I ran for the Senate, came up and went door to door for our campaign. So we all go back, and we share a lot of the same ideology. But consistency, I think, is what separates me from the rest of the crowd. And showing the courage to stand up for those basic principles which founded our nation, which are those of faith, family, and freedom. And because of that is why I've been endorsed by most every respected conservative organization in America, because of that consistency. The consistency of standing up for what is right, the vision of our founding fathers, and the courage to stand for what is right even when it's not easy to stand.
Larry Mrozinski.
I'm not a career politician. I'm the only one up here that has stated that I will not accept congressional retirement. I am for term limits. And my career has been serving the United States of America, and I want to serve you again. I believe that character has fingerprints. It tells you where you've been. I don't have any corporate sponsorship or any special interest that I owe anything to. But if you take a look at those in the race, you can find the tentacles that go out and control you, the public, in very inanimate ways. Ladies and gentlemen, I intend to serve as a statesman. That's what separates me from the field up here, and my integrity, my honor. Tested, trusted leadership. Is it not time that we had that?
Tricia Pridemore.
Thank you for the question, Chip. I believe that we're fortunate to live in one of the most amazing places, not only in the country, but also in the world. I've traveled all over the world and all over this great nation of ours, and we're just very, very fortunate to live here. I believe that I'm different than the folks up here because I believe that not all good ideas come from under a dome. I believe that the ideas on how to lead and move our country forward come from boardrooms and cubicles and kitchen tables. I believe that the folks of the 11th District have a real vision of how they want to see this district being led in a positive way, looking at ways to be able to not only secure the American dream for their children and grandchildren, but also making sure that they're able to grow their businesses along the way.
Bob Barr.
The enemy is not here this evening. The enemy is not here anytime. The enemy is in Washington. It's the Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Harry Reid, known as the Undertaker, the man who never smiles, and it's faceless bureaucrats all across this country who wield the heavy hand of government power to stifle creativity and entrepreneurship and personal freedom. The key to winning this race is to send somebody to Washington who knows how to do battle with those forces of evil, who has done so, and who has beaten them. I alone have that experience in the arena in Washington to fight and beat the forces of liberalism in Washington, in the United States Congress. If elected to serve in the 11th District, I will go back up with 8 years of seniority on key committees, the Judiciary Committee and the Financial Services Committee. That is what we need in Washington, and that is what separates Bob Barr from the other candidates.
Alan Levine.
I think that I'm a very different candidate. First of all, I have 200 position papers on my website. I've written 200 articles about exactly what I would like to do to solve problems. I'm in the IT business, and my customers say, come in, look at the problem, find out what it is, and then solve it, and then get out. They don't want me to come in and feel their pain, commiserate about what's wrong. So I look at this as a problem-solving business, and I plan to fix it. I'm also an English American, and as such, there hasn't been, as far as we can tell, an English American member of the House of Representatives since the Founding Fathers. As such, I'm known to the British government and the European Parliament, and they want to do business. They will not get involved in this election, but the eyes of the world are on this race. I get hits from everywhere, all over the world, seeing what I'm doing. So please visit the website, and you can read my positions. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Chip. What separates me from my opponents is that I'm a Georgia conservative who can get the job done. The best way to tell where someone is headed is to see where they've been, particularly in the last decade. I've been someone who's built the Republican Party here in Georgia. I've been part of the House leadership that has advanced strong conservative agenda here in Georgia. If you look at the tough legislation that we've had to pass here in Georgia, you see my fingerprints on it. You look at it when it comes to property taxes, school choice, illegal immigration, dealing with redistricting, dealing with Obamacare, dealing with fighting for a balanced budget amendment, keeping Georgia's budget balanced in tough economic times. I've been the person in the room. I'm not a rock thrower. I don't step in front of a camera at every possibility. Instead, what I do is I go in, I build a consensus, and I move the Republican conservative agenda forward. That's what we need to have in Washington right now. On the left, we've got folks who want to send us into a dangerous direction. On the right, we've got far too many people who simply talk about problems instead of doing something about it.
And the fourth question will be from J.D. Van Brink.
What changes do you think are necessary for Social Security and Medicare? And do you support transitioning to personal accounts for retirement and health care?
Larry Mrozinski.
Well, very interesting question. Social Security and Medicare. It's not an entitlement, but that's what our politicians tell us. It's a trust fund. And I think it should remain solvent. You take $630 million out of the Social Security, Medicare, out of Medicare, and put it into a website for Obamacare. I think that's wrong. When Social Security used for those who are not U.S. citizens, I think that's wrong. And I think that started in 1995 when, in fact, we had America at the brink of looking at the trust funds and sharing with others who had not put into it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to keep Social Security solvent. I believe that private accounts is an option, but that option belongs to the people. What if the representatives come back and said with the people? They haven't asked them. I believe we need to ask the people. But keep Social Security and Medicare for someone who stayed for 4.5 years with his mother and retired. I know what Medicare is and what it can do and what it can't do. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to keep it.
Tricia Pridemore.
44% of the budget is made up of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I think that you look first at the administration and organizational layers of Social Security and Medicare. If you operate an organization at a 35 to 42% cost overhead, or overhead cost, you're looking at some real opportunities for cuts. That's cutting people at the federal level, and that's cutting not only individuals and staff, but also the way that they do business. And I think that considering a $17 trillion debt, we need to start there. I am for personal accounts. I'm 42 years old, and I can tell you that my generation doesn't really expect to see Social Security be there for us when we're ready to retire. I think that it's time for us to have a tough national conversation about how we're going to maybe increase the eligibility age, but making sure that people that have paid into the system, that they're able to receive the benefits of which they've been promised.
Bob Barr.
In large measure, the debates over the years, such as there have been with regard to Social Security, Medicare, and even Medicaid, are defined largely by the terminology that's used. People talk about these as entitlements. They are not entitlements. Nobody's entitled to somebody else's money to use for themselves or to flow through a bunch of bureaucrats to take from one and give to another. But there are several things that we can and should work toward to reform these programs. First of all, we need to provide more flexibility to the states in those rare instances in recent years in which states have been afforded the flexibility to tailor their Medicaid, Medicare programs to their constituents. It has worked dramatically to lower the cost and to even out those programs. The eventual goal needs to be to move those programs, Medicare and Social Security in particular, toward personal savings accounts, which empowers the people to have at least some degree of control over their money.
Alan Levine.
I have no issue at all with Social Security or Medicare. I have an issue with our government spending so much money that they will bankrupt us in a matter of 4 years. I believe that in probably 4 years we'll have a dollar collapse, and we'll lose the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference in Vermont, the British pound lost its reserve currency to the U.S. dollar. The United States economy took off like a rocket. If we lose that, we're in big trouble. We must grow the economy. What's going to happen soon, I think, is that Social Security and Medicare will be means testing, meaning that if you have done very well in your lifetime, you won't get what you normally would expect, while people who didn't do very well, perhaps didn't choose to work very hard, they will get full benefit of Social Security and Medicare. So leave it the way it is.
Ed Lindsay.
Thank you, J.D., good question. I'm in a unique position in that I've got a mama who's 87, who's drawing Social Security and basically relies on Medicare for health insurance. And I got 3 teenage boys. Actually, they're not teenagers anymore. I got an older boy who's 22 and twins who are 21. So they're at the twins are, and the older boy are at the beginning of their employment cycle in life, and I got a mama at the end. And I got to try to figure out a way to make sure that Medicaid care and Social Security are there for my mama during the rest of her life, and also there's something there for my sons when they reach that particular age. The disadvantage of coming a little bit late into this roundtable here is that a lot of the good points have been made. And I do agree with some of the things that have been said. This is not an entitlement, it's a trust. We've got to do things like what Tricia was talking about in terms of taking on the overhead and cost and figuring out a way to bring health insurance, rather health costs, down to a stable level. We've got to start looking and taking seriously the question of whether or not, for my son's generation, whether or not we should raise the period from 65 to 67 or 68 years old. If we do that, I believe
Thank
that we
you, Mr.
can
Lindsay.
maintain the system. Thank you.
Barry Loudermilk?
I was speaking to a group of college students just a few weeks ago and asked everyone in the room, how many of you believe you'll achieve the American dream? Only about 2 of the students raised their hand. And then I asked them, how many of you actually think you'll ever see any of the dollars that you're putting into Social Security? And not a single one of them raised their hand. And the problem is because of a loss of a term that we used to have, which was called the full faith and credit of the United States of America. And we've lost faith in our government because the government has gotten too big. And of course, as we've seen the debt that we've incurred, we've lost the credit of this nation as well. We have to, it isn't whether we want to, we have to reform these programs. It's just like every other Depression-era program that was a temporary solution has become a permanent problem in this nation. We have to reform it. We have to cut costs. And yes, I support migrating these programs to private accounts. But there has to be a transition because the money that was put in by the previous generations belonged to them as well.
The 5th question is from Roseanne Hall.
Considering the problems that Americans are experiencing with the Affordable Health Care Act, what efforts would you engage to either improve or remove it?
Tricia?
House Republicans have voted over 40 times to repeal Obamacare. And until the Republican Party has a Senate and has a majority in the Senate and has the White House, there really is not a possibility to be able to just repeal it on its own. I instead believe that we need to promote solutions. And I think that a really great solution that's out there is Dr. Tom Price's Empowering Patients First Act. What it does is it opens up the relationship back to patients and doctors so that we can have real free market alternatives in health care. It also allows us to purchase insurance across state lines, all the while ensuring that people that have a pre-existing condition can be covered. So I would encourage folks to look into the Empowering Patients First Act. I think it's a great first step.
Bob Barr?
The Obamacare legislation, when it passed the House, was well over 2,000 pages in length. It is one of those rare pieces of legislation, lengthy legislation, in which there is not one good piece of anything, not one good crossed T or dotted I. Eventually, what we have to do is we have to kill it. We have to drive a stake through its heart, shoot it, burn it, cut it up, and scatter its 4 ashes to the world. In the meantime, what Congress has to do, and this is an important power that the House of Representatives has that is not used often enough or consistently enough. We need to use the power of the purse to begin doing in a constitutional way what Obama is doing unconstitutionally. We need to defund specific provisions in the Affordable Care Obamacare Act and attach those to pieces, to appropriations bills that the president must have in order to run the programs that he favors. That will do one of 2 things. He will either be forced to sign it with those limitations in it or bring him to the negotiating table where we can start to affect those changes.
Mr. Levine?
I would say that most people in this room think that Obamacare is a law. It isn't. It's a framework which the regulators and the president seem to change frequently. The regulators will be working on Obamacare for the next probably 40 years in order to finalize what it actually means. That is our problem. I'm the only candidate for this position that was brought up under the national health system in England, and I know how bad it is. Obamacare is one of 3 steps, the first of 3 steps towards a single payer system, in other words, a national health program. The second step, there's a representative in Connecticut who wants to incorporate the people who are denied Medicaid under the state's mandate to provide it for 3 years, that is, under federal payment. And the next stage after that will be a taxation, which will take the insurance companies out of the picture. So we will have a national health system, and it must be stopped.
Ed Lindsay?
Thank you, and another great question. The first thing we do basically is fight, and fight outside the box. Think creatively about ways in which we can remove Obamacare from our society, because it is a very dangerous program that will cripple our long-term economic health. That's why I offered the Lindsay Amendment in the Georgia House this year that basically sets forth how the state of Georgia will not be using state taxpayers' hard-earned dollars to help fund Obamacare. Bottom line is, and we've already, I don't know if folks can pick this up, but this is a triangle, folks, and herein lies the problem. Anytime that you got patient A going to service provider B, and C being the government paying for it, you got an inherent problem because A and B do not have a vested interest in controlling cost. That's why you've got to bring market policies back into this whole system and make A and B have a vested interest in controlling the cost. That's what we need to be doing. Tricia mentioned Congressman Price's program, and I agree with that. Thank you.
Mr. Loudermilk?
The Affordable Care Act is neither affordable or does it promote health care as a government takeover of the insurance industry. There needed to be reforms, but this was not the answer, and it needs to go away. But the reality is, even if the Republicans take the Senate and we pass a complete repeal, which I will vote for, I'll put my name on it and I'll fight for it. The likelihood is the current resident of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, he has a phone and a pen, as he said, and he will veto it. So what we have to do is take advantage of the situation that is at hand and institute free market principles. Section 10,104 of Obamacare exempts direct primary care from Obamacare. Direct primary care is simple. It's just like when you take your car to the auto shop to be repaired, you pay cash for it. We need to implement those types of policies and procedures, remove the caps on health savings accounts, allow employers to put more into health savings accounts, and allow that to pay directly cash for direct primary care. That can truly revolutionize the healthcare industry in America by true free market reforms.
Sorry. Janelle went wild with the bell.
I like the bill.
Mr. Loudermilk, would you mind sharing your microphone with Mr. Rosinski? We're hearing that we can't hear you.
And it's a great question, and I think the question was, what are the solutions? Well, ColonelLarry.com, I've written about these solutions in excruciating detail, everything down to minimum loss ratios. Ladies and gentlemen, we have health care by zip code. If you live in Albany, you're paying 3 times as much you did on September, October of last year. January 1st, somebody in Albany went up to $364 a month. Why? Because it's by zip code, quality health. We need to make sure that deductibles are raised. It's outlawed under Obamacare, and we need to make sure that someone who has the withdrawal can have the coverage. We went from a 6-to-1 ratio to a current 3-to-1 ratio, putting the burden on the back of our young people in college today and causing them to pay not only for Medicare when they work, but also for the higher insurance premiums. No. You have to come with solutions. I don't want to see a single payer and have this fail. We will not capitulate. We offer solutions, and that's what I will do when I get to Congress.
The 6th question is from Chip Lake.
Thank you. The issues facing our nation are complex, and the solutions are also complex. Recently, a candidate for U.S. Senate here in Georgia made comments critical of one of his opponents for not having a college degree. As a result of those comments, a debate has begun over what qualities are most important for an elected official to possess in order to be in a position to solve these complex problems. Without asking you to wade into the Senate primary, what qualities do you believe are most important for a member of Congress to possess in order to be in a position to positively influence change in Washington?
Bob Barr.
Not only a candidate, but the member of Congress that represents, beginning in January of 2015, the 11th District of Georgia, must have the qualities of being someone with his heart and soul not only in the district from which he or she represents, but also somebody who understands our form of government, who has taken an oath of office to that government and to that Constitution, who understands how to get things done, not only what needs to be done in Washington, but how to get things done. It's very easy in Washington, or as in the state capitol, to introduce legislation. You just draft it up, you give it to the clerk, and they file it. And you can go home and you can say, I've introduced a piece of legislation. It's very easy to give a good stump speech. Everybody in the House of Representatives can get a 1-minute speech every single day. What's more difficult is to actually move that conservative agenda forward. That is the ability that we need, given the challenges ahead, whether it is the Base Realignment and Cloture Commission, whether it's reducing government spending. That's what we need, the ability to get things done.
Mr. Levine.
Well, you have to start off by telling the truth to the American public. The American public knows the truth, but they are so used to being lied to out of Washington that they just accept it. That's the way it is. So telling the truth is number one. You have to, secondly, think in terms of solutions. I've been in the IT business for 30 years, and I think in terms of solutions and not commiserating about what the problem is. As such, I've had a very successful career in figuring out the best way to get to the desired outcome. That is the most important thing. And the desired outcome for our nation is fundamentally by growing our gross domestic product rapidly. Many of these problems will just vanish if we can grow our GDP rapidly and provide full-time jobs, well-paid jobs for American workers, to the point that the unemployment numbers are never mentioned on television because there is full employment. I can provide that.
Ed Lindsay.
Jep, good question. Let me first start off by saying that as the grandson of a farmer who never had an opportunity to go to college, I can tell you that my granddaddy was one of the wisest men I ever knew, and he could take on just about any issue. The 4 attributes that I would say are vital for any public servant in any particular job for success, and what I've seen after a decade in the Georgia House, is number 1, having the patience to listen, to recognize that you're not the smartest person in the room, but your job is to find the smartest person in the room and listen to them. Secondly is to have the strength to lead. The third is to have the wisdom to know how to negotiate without compromising your principles, and that takes experience. And fourth, and perhaps most importantly, having the courage to stay the course when times get tough. Because no matter how right you may be, there's always going to be somebody out there with a vested interest not to change things, and you're going to have to fight all the way through it. And so you've got to have the courage to stay the course. Those are basically the 4 attributes that I would say are vitally important for anyone who wants to hold this 11th District job.
Barry Loudermilk.
That is a very excellent question. And the very first thing our founding fathers said was the character of the individual. They have to have a selfless nature because they put serving others before themselves. But we also have to have a vision, the vision of our founding fathers, not just the words that we see on the Constitution, as Thomas Jefferson said, that the politicians and the judges will be able to squeeze any meaning out of those words, but the true spirit of the Constitution. The vision our founding fathers had of this nation was a government, a federal government that was so small and insignificant that you tended to forget that it even existed. We also need experience. As a small business owner, I live day to day what big government and overregulation is doing. As a former legislator in the State House and the State Senate, I know what it takes to negotiate and reach across to others with different ideas. And as I say, I will negotiate my preferences, but I'll never compromise my principles. And it's to be well-founded, to understand the rules, the ideas, and the principles that our founding fathers held for this nation.
Larry Mrozinski.
As the son of a father whose father died, my father never graduated high school, so I understand the question. My father always taught us 2 boys, my older and younger brother, and myself, that education is something that he wanted to afford us. So I worked hard, and my mother made sure that that happened in our educational life as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I attained a master's degree in international relations because as a small child, I envisioned myself serving in the military and, yes, the State Department. I think education is something that we seek out, so I could sit across the table with the Russians and also our friends, the Israelis. Oh, yes, I'm ready to negotiate because I've done it. And I will continue to do it for America and for the days that are ahead. As uncertain as they may be, Colonel Larry Mrozinski will be there, and I'll make sure the waters are calm.
Tricia Pridemore.
When I look for a leader, I look for somebody who's willing to work hard, with a servant's heart, somebody who's real, somebody who's interested in listening. But more than anything else, I look for somebody who is strongly rooted in faith and rooted in something that's bigger than themselves, that truth and those principles that guide them and have guided them their whole lives.
And the seventh question is from J.D. Van Brink.
Regarding national security, do you think that the spending level and/or priorities are adequate, and what would you change?
Alan Levine.
Well, this is an interesting question. I grew up in England. My father got a subscription to Newsweek for about 5 or 6 years. And between 12 or 13 to when I was 18, I read Newsweek, every word of Newsweek, every single week. And I couldn't understand why this country was fighting in Vietnam. And I concluded, and I have not changed my opinion, that our foreign policy is terrible and has been terrible probably for the last 50 years. We need to think what we're doing. We need to stop interfering with other countries and destabilizing them and hoping we have a positive outcome. As the CIA says, we have blowback when we do things because we can. So I would suggest that we keep our defense forces well funded, but don't go out looking for trouble. We don't need it.
Ed Lindsay.
JD, thank you again for that question. In 2 months, my oldest son, Harmon, will graduate from West Point and put on his shoulders second lieutenant bars. I never want him or any of the other cadets that are graduating from West Point or any other young man or woman stepping up to defend our country to engage in a fair fight. I want them to go into battles that have to be fought with overwhelming odds. And that's why I'm so very troubled with the present status of our military readiness. We are very aware of the dangers of the drawdown in terms of the size of our military. But folks aren't focusing a little bit deeper. Our military is right now a shell. We're not capable of taking on a lot of the enemies in our world. And keep in mind, we do have a dangerous world that we still live in. Danger in part, quite frankly, because we have a situation in which our friends don't trust us and our enemies don't fear us. We need to reestablish that, make sure that our military is second to none, and make sure that Harmon Lindsay and any other person going into battle does not go in with a fair fight, but overwhelming odds.
Barry Loudermilk.
As I stated earlier, I'm a veteran. I come from a long line of veterans. My dad served as a medic in World War II. My brother served in Vietnam. I served in the Air Force, and my youngest son is currently airborne Pathfinder. The problem we have is when you look at the structure of our budget, there's two budgets, a mandatory budget and a discretionary budget. National defense is in the discretionary budget. There is a lot that needs to change. We need to reform the procurement system. It's ridiculous when it takes 15 years from the approval of a new fighter jet for it to actually to come off the assembly line. We also need to stop social engineering in our military. One of our advisors on our military committee showed me a memo from a division the other day where they ordered soldiers out of the field training to come in and give them sensitivity training. We must stop using the military as a social engineering lab and put them back on the line defending our freedom.
Larry Mrozinski.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's 2.2 million active in reserve in the military. This President of the United States, through Secretary Hagel, will bring us down below World War II levels. Every administration since World War I, World War II, and Korea has brought on a war. Article 1, Section 8 says that Congress has the power to declare war. I can guarantee you, as your congressman, your sons and daughters will not only be cared for, those who are veterans, but also going into harm's way. And when we liberate that country, We'll make sure that they come home so they don't overstay their welcome. What we have here going on today is simply, not only it's a budget, it's a leadership crisis. And ladies and gentlemen, I've seen on the horizon what we have. My son Michael, who served as a sergeant in the infantry, said, "Dad, they teach us more about political correctness than they do about survival skills." Ladies and gentlemen, that will change because having experience out of the 14 congressional districts, I will bring that to Congress and make America stronger.
Tricia Pridemore.
Our allies need to trust us, and the enemies of freedom need to fear us, plain and simple. I believe, like President Reagan believed, in peace through strength. I believe that we need to do everything that we can to stop the reformation of the USSR and stop our current administration's policy of kowtowing to Comrade Putin. I also believe in strong protection of the nation of Israel. I also strongly believe that it's time that we enforce tough sanctions against Iran and Syria and those nations that completely oppose freedom. I think that when you consider the cost of freedom and how it needs to be explored in our budget, I think that we need to roll back Secretary Hagel's budgetary lines that he's just put forward. I think that it's time that we put ourselves in a position of protecting our veterans. I think it's time that we look at folks like Ed's son and make sure that he has everything that he needs to make sure that he does a job well done.
Bob Barr.
Many of us in this room and many of the listening audience lived through the debacle of the Carter drawdown, which created a hollow military a generation ago. And we are indeed still paying the price today in many respects for what Carter visited on this country and on the world. We see it with the continued strength and rise of Iran. And we see it again on steroids with this president, President Obama. Even though we do not have the leadership that we need at the commander-in-chief position, and we will not at least until January of 2017 with a new president. In the meantime, we must ensure and do everything that we can to ensure that our military has the proper logistics, the proper equipment, the proper personnel, and you cannot do that, Chip, with the current spending levels and those that are projected. We need to beef those up, and we need, particularly here in this district, to be on guard against another BRAC cut, because it's coming.
And our 8th question will be from Roseanne Hall.
When you determined that you wanted to run for Congressional District 11, what are the number 1, 2, and 3 reasons why you chose to run?
Ed Lindsay.
Thank you very much. First reason was policy. I was frustrated with the fact, after 10 years in the House, of seeing more and more of the problems that we were having to deal with on the state level having originated in Washington without anyone up in Washington really fighting to come up with solutions. So that was policy, number 1. Number 2 was party, quite frankly. I was frustrated with the fact that my national party is simply sitting there spinning its wheels and not actually advancing a strong, aggressive, conservative alternatives to the Obama administration. It's no surprise to a lot of folks that while most Americans agree with our principles, they don't think that we know what we're doing, and we need to change that. Number 3, and I've mentioned them, and they're 3 boys, Harmon, Charlie, and Zach. I want to make sure that they have the kind of future that they deserve to have. That this country should be offering all of our children in this country. And I'm going to fight very hard to make sure that the promise of America is brighter for them than it was for me, and that's the way it should be for our country.
Barry Loudermill.
It's interesting that one question is asked more than any other question. Why? Why are you running for office? Most candidates, they won't tell you why. They'll tell you what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. But I told you in the beginning, why? Because our children and grandchildren deserve better than what we're passing on to them. We have a very short time to turn this nation around. The second reason is when we looked at this district, it's one of the most conservative districts in the entire nation. We wanted to make sure that someone who represented those ideas and principles were in Washington, somebody who had the courage to stand up and fight, who had the experience and had the reputation of standing up against big government. The third is what I said earlier. that we don't have a whole lot of time. This is the most critical election in the history of our nation. My children tell me often, Dad, we just want the America that you had growing up. We want to experience the freedom and the liberty that you had, not being constrained by big government. We can turn this nation around, but it's going to take a short amount of time, and it's going to take courageous leadership.
Larry Mrozinski.
To serve again, to restore the faith that you, in your homes, have lost to representative government. I want to restore that and bring back your belief in statesmanship that manages state affairs. As the 11th Congressional District Representative to our 2012 RNC convention in Tampa, I had the privilege to have input into our platform, 2012, one of the finest that we've ever crafted. And I was chairman of Veterans Outreach in the state of Georgia, the first appointed by one of the greatest chairmen we've had, Sue Everhart. And ladies and gentlemen, I've learned across all of Georgia and doing all the walking on nearly 3,000 doors that I've knocked on. They want trust in their representative. That's what they're looking for. And that's why I want to deliver that.
Tricia Pridemore.
When I talked with my husband about running for Congress, it was because I wanted to serve people. After we sold our company, I got very involved in a variety of Cobb County philanthropies, but spent most of my time with Must Ministries and working with people that are on the verge of losing their homes. They're on the verge, in many cases, of losing their families. You really see that people want to do the right thing. They want to work. They want opportunity. And I want more people, I want everyone, to have the opportunity to sit on their driveway with their spouse, dream up an idea, and be able to achieve the American dream. I'm also doing it because when you consider the fact that we live in such an amazing country, this district really provides an opportunity to share our values all across the country. We have a great way of doing that with the outreach of the district, but also the fact that, for many folks, Cobb County is the center of Republican politics. And I want to make sure that I represent Cobb County in a very positive, conservative way.
Bob Barr.
I've decided to run to return to the Congress of the United States because I love this country too much not to do so. I also am seeking the office of the representative from the 11th District because I know that you can't win if you don't fight, and you can't fight if you're not in the arena. That is the only place to be if you care for this country and believe that you can do something about it. Third reason is that I do know to an absolute certainty that we can do better. I've been there as a part of the team that did, in fact, defeat the programs of a liberal president. We balanced the budget. We reduced taxes. We reformed welfare, even though there was a sitting Democrat, a liberal, in the White House. And lastly, I run because I hear what Ronald Reagan heard when he talked about the American sound. That American sound, which is big-hearted, compassionate, and strong, still echoes out across this country, across this district. I hear it and I heed it.
Alan Levine.
My three reasons are: one, this flag. When I was brought up in London, England, I used to visit the American Embassy, sit across from the embassy in Grosvenor Square, and I used to eat my lunch sandwiches, and I used to look at this flag. I love this country. It means everything to me. I'm honored to be a citizen, and I have to return the favor. The problems we have are fixable. We have to increase the gross domestic product. That will fix our problems. So this flag is primarily it. This country, when I came here, was unbelievably optimistic. In the last 10 years, it has become pessimistic. I have seen what happens in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, when you have out-of-control spending. We are going down the same road as Great Britain, and I want to stop it. And with your support, I will. We'll have a prosperous United States forever.
And the ninth question is from Chip Lake.
Congress's approval ratings are at an all-time low, and most people agree that Washington, D.C. is broken. Many would agree that many of the problems in Congress lie within the structural framework of which Congress operates. Other than voting conservative, which is very important for this congressional district, is there anything else that a member of Congress can do to fix what's broken in Washington, D.C.?
Barry Loudermilk.
Any public service isn't just about ideals and ideology, but it's about relationships. It's the ability to build relationships with others and focus on those things of which you agree. Most everyone that, especially from this area and the other members of Congress from Georgia that I've met with, I've actually traveled with several others that are considered constitutional conservatives. And they begin to organize themselves into a caucus to focus on those things that are most important, like balancing the budget and limiting government, and building a caucus together that works together for solutions. That's one of the first things that we can do. But we also have to reach out and do some other things, dynamic things, such as changing some of the rules under which Congress operates, like putting a single subject rule in, like we have in the state of Georgia, to where you can only have one subject matter in a piece of legislation to stop Congress from inserting spending bills into defense bills. And so there's a lot of structure that needs to change, which will have to happen over time, but relationships have to be in place.
Larry Rosinski.
Leadership, ideas, and that's what I put forth in this campaign and I have online. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you one example. The donor state. The last 50-plus years, Georgia's only gotten back 84.0%. Some up here have seen that pass and have done nothing about it. In our House of Representatives, I will make sure that your roads are not tolled. And that's what I brought, that we, as one of 9 out of the 48, are not donor states to the others. So our excise tax from gasoline comes back here. That's one idea of leadership. Talk is cheap. Leadership is what we need. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been an activist civilian after the military, and I will do what I did on active duty to not only fix our national security issues and our troops and keep them out of harm's way. I'll bring that to you in Congress.
Tricia Pridemore.
We need to listen, but we need to look for common ground without sacrificing our principles. 47% of House Republicans have been in Washington 37 months or less. 21% of them have never held elected office before. I think that what we're looking at is a group of people that are looking to bring that fresh perspective. There are people that, like me, they've signed the front of a paycheck before when they knew that there were times they couldn't sign the back of one. And I think that when you consider the fact that you've got a new, young group of people in Washington, D.C. that are looking to make fundamental sound changes to be able to help our nation thrive, I want to be a part of that.
Bob Barr.
When we balanced the federal budget back in 1997, it didn't happen by chance. When we impeached a crooked president in 1998, in December of that year, it didn't happen by chance. It happened because a group of men and women who believe in principles, who understood the Constitution, who had the integrity to stand relentlessly to do what was right, worked toward that end and accomplished those and many other accomplishments during those years when I had the honor of serving in the Congress. There are many things that can be done. Yes, it is broken, but it is not irreparable. We have the Constitution to guide us. That gives us a proper framework. It gives us the owner's manual, so to speak, within which to do it. It takes perseverance, which I have and have used before. It takes prioritization, and it takes realizing that you're not in Congress simply to grab a headline. You're there to relentlessly fight on behalf of the American people in your district to shrink the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government. I've been there. I've done it. I ask for your votes to do it again.
Alan Levine.
When you go to Washington, you have to work towards positive change. The problem is, in Washington, is that the people who've been there the longest have seniority. And when they have seniority, they will block change that may offend their special interests, who give them money all of the time. So the key is to provide solutions. And one of the solutions that I have that nobody else has ever brought up is a practical term limits amendment. Term limits amendment is very, very difficult to pass, but I have a practical replacement for that. If the members of Congress run for re-election after between 8 or 12 years and they run, then they lose their pensions. By losing their pensions, they will quit. We need new blood in Washington. We need to move the people who have been there for too long and who have outstayed their welcomes but will not go. We have to move them out, and that's what, by voiding congressional pensions, if they run again, will help move them out so they can retire.
Thank you for the question. You know, last October, as a Halloween treat, I actually wrote a paper in which I pointed out that zombies are better regarded in the United States today than members of Congress. And unfortunately, the poll numbers tended to bear that up. It's been touched on before by some of my comrades here, but let me sort of touch on it again. Finding common ground. I've learned a long time ago in politics to keep your opponents temporary and your friends permanent. That's because someone who could be your harshest critic on a bill today may be your closest ally tomorrow. And you've got to have that attitude to walk in. I've done that here in Georgia. Could not have, I was part of the leadership that got the charter school amendment passed. Couldn't have done that without, quite frankly, a few liberal Democrats coming with us. I've done that when it came to human trafficking. Couldn't have done that without reaching out to different disparate groups that normally don't get along and make sure that they all stayed in the room until we reached a common resolution on that issue, and a host of other things. So I think attitude is one of the most important things that you can have in Congress.
Mr. Van Brink has another question for everyone. We will start with Bob Barr.
Thank you. Article 5 of the United States Constitution provides for 2/3 of the states to apply to Congress to call a convention for the purpose of proposing constitutional amendments. A growing number of people believe that this method is our best chance to initiate term limit, balanced budget, and tax reform amendments. Do you support this effort?
You referred to the Constitution of the United States of America. The Constitution of the United States of America, I believe, is the greatest document writ by the hand of man. You could amend it 50 ways to Sunday, and it still is not going to bring us back to the government that was envisioned by this document and by our founders. The point is, it is not the number of amendments to the Constitution, it is the will, the knowledge, and the perseverance of the American people to get back to what this document provides for us, and that is a government of limited enumerated powers. We have tried, and I voted for a balanced budget amendment. We didn't get it through. I voted for a term limits amendment. We were not able to get it through. You have to keep pressing these issues, but until we have a judiciary that understands what the Constitution is, until we have a president that understands he is not an imperial president, and until we have a Congress that is peopled by men and women who understand the role of the Congress to provide effective oversight and spending limits, we will continue to have those problems.
Alan Levine.
Constitutional amendments are very, very difficult to pass. They require a very high vote in the House and the Senate, and also they have to be ratified by the majority of the states. That is extremely difficult to accomplish. As such, people propose a variety of amendments which don't get passed, and they probably know ahead of time nothing's really going to happen except for it looks good to propose certain amendments. I always propose practical solutions, and which is why I brought up the concept of voiding congressional pensions if they run again. It's an easy to pass type of bill if it's a rider on a must-pass bill, and then you could work with your former caucus of like-minded individuals in the House of Representatives and push these through. I'm all for a variety of constitutional amendments, but they are, from a practical point of view, they're very, very difficult to pass, and as such, I would go for the practical solutions instead.
JD, thank you for the question. The answer is yes. That's why I co-sponsored one bill this year that called for a convention of the states dealing with the balanced budget amendment, and I fought on the floor for an additional 2. One argument that we heard against calling for a convention of the states was that it's a radical concept. It has never been done before. And they're right. The fact of the matter is that article was put into the Constitution as a means for the states to be able to step in when the federal government refuses to do so. In 1982, when it comes to a balanced budget amendment, Congress voted for the first time for a balanced budget amendment. It failed. At that time, we only had a $1 trillion debt. It came up again in 1995, and I applaud Bob Barr for voting for it, but it failed again. At that time, we only had a $5 trillion debt. As was pointed out earlier tonight, we now have over an $18 trillion debt, or approaching that very rapidly. The fact of the matter is, the question shouldn't be whether we should do it. The question should be, if not now, when? And my answer is, now is the time for the states to put pressure on Congress. If they won't act, the states should. Thank you.
Barry Loudermilk.
The original Constitutional Convention in 1787, the founders gathered together and they realized they needed to provide a way to amend the Constitution. And as they were discussing how they were going to do that, they realized that Congress would be unlikely and probably would never pass any amendment that restricted their own power or their ability to spend money. History has proven that to be true of every amendment that's ever been passed in the Constitution. All the amendments restricted the power of the states. They never restrict the power of the government itself. The founders put in Article 5 the ability for the people to amend the Constitution by calling for a convention of the states to propose an amendment to the Constitution which it would follow the same process. I have co-sponsored legislation in the Georgia Senate that passed the House this year that would call for a convention of the states for a balanced budget amendment. This is the time that the founding fathers saw that we would need this, because I believe that if the Convention of the States gets close enough, as history has proven, it will force Congress to act and pass a balanced budget amendment.
Larry Mrozinski.
We, the people of the United States, to form a more perfect union. So the answer is yes. We, the people, you go with the will. It takes 34 to call a convention of states, 38 to pass an amendment. And let's be reminded, the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment, that the federal government shall not exceed its authority. And what we have here today, we can clearly see, is exceeding its authority. Oh yes, if the will of the people call a convention of states, then so be it. That's what we need to do to rein in. And we'll have those articulated and have those bumpers that will not exceed what the Convention of States went in to do. And therefore, we protect our present Constitution of the United States of America.
Tricia Pridemore.
I only see danger in opening up the Constitution while Barack Obama is president. I also think that for all of us up here that believe in a constitutional amendment to balance the budget, we do that as Republicans by winning elections. First, we win the argument, then we win the vote, then we win the elections. And I think that when you look at this year, it's critical that Republicans take the Senate, and in 2016, it's even more critical that we take back the White House.
Thank you. And now our candidates will have their 2 minutes for a closing statement. Someone drew your name out of a hat, and so this is the order. Barry Loudermilk.
You know, growing up here in Georgia, my parents instilled in me a certain set of values that we've passed on to our children. Those values are put God first in everything you do, serve others before you serve yourself, and that standing up for what is right is not always easy, but it is always right. My dad, World War II veteran, served as a medic in D-Day in the Battle of the Bulge, and although he saw the worst of humanity, he never lost sight of the cause for which he was fighting, because he had his eyes upon his cause, not his circumstance. He believed in America. And he also passed along to me some advice. He said, son, never complain. Complaining never accomplishes anything. If there's something you don't like, you can do something to change your situation, or just accept it as inevitable and go on with life. In 2004, I took my father's advice, and I used my experience as a husband and a father, as a veteran, as an employee and an employer, and I took that experience to the State House, where I served in both the House and the Senate. During that time, I became known as one of the foremost conservative leaders in Georgia because of my continual stance on those basic principles that founded this nation of faith, family, and freedom. Today, I'm running for Congress, and because of my consistency and my commitment to the Constitution, I have been endorsed by most every major conservative organization in this nation. Concerned Women of America, Family Research Council, Restore Our Republic, Madison Project have all endorsed our campaign. As a veteran, knowing the need for a strong national defense, I've been endorsed by the National Defense PAC. Freedom Works named me one of the top 5 candidates in the nation, and most recently, Senate Conservatives Fund named me the #2 conservative candidate running for the House of Representatives in the entire nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we can take this nation back. We can restore America, but it's going to take us working together. We must give it back to give our children a future that is free, safe, and full of opportunity. But I can't do it alone. It's going to take us working together. Go to our website, standwithbarry.com, and I would love to have your vote on May the 20th.
Alan Levine.
I love this country. I'm honored to be an American citizen, and I would do whatever I can to make this country full of optimism and successful. I am the full employment candidate. I'm the one who has practical solutions to our problems. I don't talk about, I don't use conjecture and talk general ideas, which is why I've written nearly 200 articles on my website, alanlevineforcongress.com, outlining specific problems that we have and how to resolve them. I'm a self-employed businessman, have been employed for 30 years or so, and I am paid to fix problems, and I can fix these problems in Washington. So I would urge you, please visit the website, alanlevineforcongress.com, read the newspaper articles that have been written about me from everywhere in the country and on the planet, and you'll see that I'm a different kind of candidate. I'm here to fix our nation's problems, and I will. So please visit the website, Alan Levine for Congress, and I will bring back full employment for American workers. I will bring back so many jobs that there'll be newspapers full of help wanted ads because employers cannot find people, and we'll have a sense of optimism. As it was said on the news last week, as I mentioned earlier, 8 in 9 of 9 unemployed American workers will never find full employment again. It's a disgrace. We are the most powerful country in the world, and yet only 1 in 9 will ever find a full-time job. This is terrible. I know how to bring full employment to America, not just the 11th District, but I know how to do this for the entire country. In '96, we had the Olympics. Georgia spent $2 billion on promoting Atlanta. Because I'm an English American, I can focus the eyes of the entire Commonwealth on Georgia for no cost at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Lindsay.
Well, once again, I want to thank the Cobb County Republican Women for hosting this, and I want to thank all of our listeners, both in the audience here and at home, for listening in on this very important debate. I want to start off not so much talking about me, but talking about you and making sure that you go out and vote on May 20th. Last Saturday, something very impressive happened around the world, and unfortunately it didn't get nearly the amount of press that it should have. Millions of Afghans went to the polls. They were threatened. They were told that they would be killed. They were told their families would be killed. They were told their children could be tortured if they went to the polls. But millions went to the polls. So if you're thinking about not going to the polls on May 20th, I want you to think about those Afghans who risked their lives to go to the polls to be part of a democratic process. Now, I'm Ed Lindsay, and I'm running for Congress. I've told you before, I'm a Georgia conservative who can get the job done. That's been my reputation in the Georgia House. That's what I've fought to do. What exactly does that mean in terms of how I interpret conservatism? I interpret conservatism to mean it must be a dynamic force that protects the future of our children, a dynamic force that maintains our society as that shining city on a hill, a dynamic force that takes on the problems of our present society and takes us to greater and new heights. I have worked hard for 10 years in the Georgia House, and I've succeeded on a lot of the tough issues that we now are going to have to also face in Congress. I've succeeded for the reasons that I told you, Chip, earlier about what I thought was so important in terms of a legislator. I've shown in the Georgia House that I have the patience to listen. That's what has led me to a lot of the bills that I've carried over the years, such as the human trafficking bill. I've shown that I have the strength to lead. That's what led me to fight for the charter school amendment. I've shown that I have the ability to negotiate without compromising my principles. That's how I was able to work for 5 years to balance our budget in tough times. And lastly, I've shown that I have the courage to stay the course when times get tough. My name is Ed Lindsay. I ask for your vote tonight.
Tricia Pridemore.
Thank you to the Cobb County Republican Women's Club. Thank you to our moderators, to Wynn, everyone sitting here in the auditorium, and to you all at home who chose to inform yourself about the candidates in this race instead of watching the Braves home opener. It's been an honor to share my message and our campaign with you all this evening. When you look around, you'll see that there's a lot of races, and there's a lot of people that are vying for your attention that are running for office. I hope that 7 weeks from today, you'll make the decision to send a fresh perspective to Washington, D.C., that you'll make the decision to send somebody that is going to fight for you, who's a conservative, who understands the fact that, well, we are hard-pressed on every side, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we're not in despair. See, America is so much bigger than any one president. Everything that is upon us are all things that we can overcome. And we can do it when we do it together, and we fight for what's right. My name is Tricia Pridemore, and I ask for your vote May the 20th. Please look for us on Facebook, on Twitter, and our website is pridemoreforcongress.com. Thank you so much for your attention. God bless you, and may God bless America.
Bob Barr.
I'd like to thank the Cobb County Republican Women's Club for providing this forum, hosting it this evening. And I want to thank Cobb County for making this facility available. Thank the audience for being here. Thank the viewing audience for watching, and thank the moderator and also those asking very insightful questions. My name is Bob Barr, and I was asked by President Ronald Reagan to serve as his and your United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. When Reagan nominated me as the U.S. Attorney, he didn't set me down and say, Bob, I want you to be a mamby-pamby U.S. Attorney. Just go down there, mark time, spend a few years down there, and then leave. No, he said, I want you to go down there and I want you to represent the people of the district, the Northern District of Georgia, to put the money launderers away, the drug traffickers away, the child pornographers away, the con artists away, and the corrupt politicians especially away, and that's what I did. When I was elected to serve as your representative from the 7th District, I did not hear from a single person that they wanted a member of Congress representing the 7th District who simply talked the talk, told us how conservative he was as many times as he could, and voted the right way, and then just came back home occasionally to let us know that he was still around. No. The people of the 7th District sent me to Washington 4 times to fight for them, to shrink the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government, and I was honored to help accomplish those tasks. I ask now for the people of the 11th District to send me to the Congress to finish the job that I started on your behalf back when I served in the 7th District. To know how to prioritize the issues, to know where to go to fight for these issues, not to simply talk the talk, not to simply vote the vote, but to actually get things done to move our shared conservative agenda forward. That's what we need. We need that now more than ever. And I, Bob Barr, ask for your votes on May 20th of 2014 to do just that. Thank you.
Larry Rosinski.
Thank you to the Cobb County Republican Women's Club and to our moderators and to you at home. I thank you for the opportunity to consider me to serve again. Tested, trusted leadership. I pledge to you that I will take care of your interests and take care of the individual as well as the whole. Ladies and gentlemen, these are tough times that are ahead. It's going to have solid character and proven, and I will deliver that to you. Take a look at the many of the candidates, and also go online to finallarryedit.com. Much we could not cover here tonight. Our moderators couldn't do that because of the time constraints. Go and look at the detail. Find out where people have been. And ladies and gentlemen, where I've been and where I am, I pledge to you that in the future, I will be there for you, as I was for my mother, as I was for my grandchild born, and as I am as a Right to Life endorsed candidate. I believe that endorsements are the brick and the mortar that holds the person together. I do not need to seek that. I need to seek your vote. I believe that the endorsement is from you, and looking at my career and where I've been in service to the country, you know where I'm going. Choose a non-career politician. Take a new path. Let's have faith again. Let's restore the hope in America that we all yearn for. I do. My family does. And I'll bring it back home to you. finallarryedit.com, May 20. Help is on the way.